Well, so good morning everybody on the West Coast, good afternoon everybody on the East Coast, and good evening to my friends in the UK and Europe. I'm Tom Strange, curator for the Sigel Music Museum and also artistic director when we have something artistic going on. And today we're going to talk about three more wonderful Viennese pianos. And because the pianos are in different parts of our storage area, then the camera is going to whisk its way through. We're just working from one camera today, so I thank everybody for tuning in. I want to start with this fairly unusual piano that I've got right next to me here. When I say unusual, it is because this particular shape, there are a few other examples like this known, but not very many. I know of where one other is, and I have reports of a couple, three that might also exist. This piano here, dating from about 1815, is by the maker Anton Martin Teum, or Teum, and it's a two-syllable last name, and it's spelled various ways, so all we can do is kind of get an idea that he's trying to say Teum. To the Sigels, this piano was known as the piano that showed up in the house and now kept us from going from the dining room into the sun porch. So here it is, and it's a glorious thing. And so I want to talk a little bit about it. Let me open up the keyboard first and just show what have we got here. Well, we have a wonderful 6-octave piano. Down below, if you could see everything, and because this one is still on its pedestal and waiting to be put together for the exhibit, I can show you the pedal lyre here. We have a pair of winged harpies, and these particular harpies are the pretty harpy type. So here they are, and then we have the keyboard, the damper lift, excuse me, the bassoon, and the moderator. And so there's 3 stops on this particular piano, all set up to give us a little bit of color. When we go in to this piano, that's when things begin to get a little interesting. Now, if you noticed, I said on the title of this, Viennese pianos, vertical and upright. And you're probably asking the question, well, Tom, vertical and upright, isn't that really the same thing? And the answer is not quite. Because pianos have these technologies that are associated with them, we kind of like to put things in various categories. And so this goes into the category of the vertical piano, and in just a moment I'm going to show you why we call it that. So let me start. We're going to remove this front cover. This is a beautiful front cover. So what we have is original silk with this carved wood and composition, like a plaster composition on top of it. And it's a cornucopia, and from this cornucopia is springing forth, all these fruits, particularly grapes and such. There's some other fruits in there as well. So what I want to do is I want to shift this little medallion over. Notice how that works. And on all the Viennese pianos, the upright type pianos, you'll see medallions or some sort of a decorative feature, and so that you'll know how to do this, they shift, and they shift away to allow us to remove this panel. So this panel comes up and off, just so you've seen. Here it is from the back. So, a lovely, well-made panel, and then again from the front here, gold leaf, and something that looks like lapis as a paint pigment. I'm sure originally it was very deep and very beautiful. So now you're seeing the inside of the piano part, and this is the fallboard area, and it also removes very simply. So now we're deeper into the piano. Here's the name board. And I'll come up a little closer. Hopefully that you guys can see we have an engraving that's been placed onto the wood here, and then the maker has signed his name over here. This is number 82. So there are 3 surviving examples by Tewum, and this is the lowest serial number of the ones that survive. So what we notice immediately is here are the strings, and they come down to a hitch pin area right down here. And so the strings start at the level of the keyboard. When we think of the term vertical piano, a vertical piano is one where the strings start at the level of the keyboard. Now, most of the time, the vertical pianos that started like this would then have very long strings indeed, as you might imagine, sticking straight up in the air to one side, and then coming down for the treble. And so this particular style of piano got the name giraffe piano. And a giraffe piano simply meant that it was tall, and one area of it kind of looked a little like a head, and so, okay, we're going to call this a giraffe piano. This is more like a recumbent giraffe piano because it's down on its side. And I'll tell you, as you look at it, one of the things that immediately strikes you is that this looks a lot like a square piano that has been made into an upright. And it's an interesting concept, and not the first time that people had done this before, but notice how, in order to get some very good string length, we put everything at a long angle, and so we're bringing the strings all the way back up into here, and that gives us the ability to have a pretty good string length to this thing. As far as this piano has been restored, and I suspect that it can play again, but I also know that it's been detensioned intentionally. So Marlowe has taken the tension off, and I don't have a record for why Marlowe did that. So before I start putting tension on this instrument, I'm going to be spending some real quality time with it to see how does the structure lie. Is there any reason why it should or shouldn't be tensioned? It is unique enough of an instrument that if there's any concern at all, we probably won't try to tune it up. I did hit take a single note, and it has a very nice sound to it, I think. And so we'll just have to see. Now, how does it work? Well, it's rather unique again, and fairly simple. I can take one of these key levers out, and then all the action is there. So hopefully you guys can see this, but here is the beak for the hammer, and as the key pushes down, this grabs the little pawl in the back, and it flips the hammer forward. And then this little fellow, this kind of Rube Goldberg looking wire that sticks up here, will grab the damper, and as this end of the key goes down, this part goes up, and it lifts the damper away from the string. Now, you might not be able to see it, but there's a very delicate brass spring here, and then a little saddle of silk that grabs the hammer. And so rather than just relying on gravity to return the hammer, we have a little spring action to return the hammer as well. So very simple, very straightforward sort of way of doing it, and elegantly carved out underneath to balance the weight. The action is very light, and the action is very fast on this piano, and then extremely elegantly built. And so the piano has all the makings of somebody who was quite a master of this. We know that in Vienna in 1815, Tewum had applied to have a piano factory there, and chances are that he actually accomplished that. As I say, we know of 2 grands, and then this kind of recumbent giraffe piano that exists. We don't have any others. Something may have gotten in the way. We don't have a good feeling on his life story. He's not one of the more well-known builders. And then the rest of the piano is as elegantly put together. Now you'll notice what looks like a bunch of new wood here. This is the damper, and then as you push the pedal, this brings the dampers up, and so that pulls the dampers away from the string. This is all restoration work that Tim Hamilton did. We do have the original pieces that went in here, but obviously this piano was restored back to some form of playing condition, so that folks could understand what was going on. So there we have the Taewum recumbent piano, compact form, made to be more of a decorative instrument, but it's also musically quite competent. And a piano like this would have done, very well in the home, not taking up a lot of room, and yet being very elegant and something, nice to look at. So here's an instrument that, begins this idea of the piano as not simply an object, a musical instrument or a professional instrument, but something that you could use as a decorative accent in your house. And we're going to see at least one more example of that, probably one of the most famous examples. The next piano we're going to go to is the one that's attributed to Anton Schlepp. And so let's go to there. Once again, I apologize, I can't see your questions right now, but I will try to get back to you and answer them as quickly as I can. So, moving along, now I will tell you that we're going to zoom through the storage area. You're likely to see wonderful things. You'll want to ask about each and every one. Patience, please. I'm going to get to them. So you'll pass several hundred square pianos as we move our way down to the Schlepp. So this piano style is called a Lyra-flügel, and I think you can understand very quickly why they would call that. Obviously, we have this Apollo lyre-like feature here, and this is the front of the piano. Right now, it kind of looks a little faded and gold-looking, and I have the blinds open so that we can have a little extra light on this. Normally, all the windows are blocked up, obviously, so no sunlight ever gets to this, but over the years, the sunlight has gotten to this. Before, this was a lovely pale green silk that's been pleated with the button. And then notice that we have two little features up here, two little knobs that actually move to the side. And when we push them to the side, then we can remove the front. And on the back, you can maybe see just a little bit more of the green where the sun hasn't spoilt it. But it was originally a lovely pale green. Now, you may say, okay, Tom, well, what are you going to replace the silk in this front? And I think the smart thing to do, I have some wonderful cabinet making friends, and I believe what we really ought to do on this one is remake the entire wooden front and re-silk that, and we'll hold this one sort of in abeyance, and then we can mount the new front onto the instrument, and people can see it as it would have been, and then they would also have a chance to see where it is today. So give it a little bit of a, both ways sort of thing. So inside the instrument, once again, a lovely 6-octave piano, a little easier to see the keyboard now, and then this instrument has an interesting way of working. So this sort of slides up like this, and then we have two little wooden tangs here that catch inside, and that allows us to take the fallboard away, and then as usual the name board comes up. In this case we have a little catch on the side, so that holds the board in place, and then one last board here at the key lever area, and then we can get to seeing inside the action. So what can we say about this action? Well, first of all, this action is relatively different than the other one. The other instrument, the Taewum that we just looked at, is clearly a Viennese style with the little beak that catches the pole and flips the hammer forward. This one, on the other hand, looks a whole lot more like an English grand piano. So if I can show you, here's the back check. These are back checks, and they're there to keep the hammer from bouncing and ruining your repetition. And so here is one of the key levers, all right, and as we look at this, we see again the spring action on the side. Hopefully you guys can see this. And here's the little jack here that grabs the tip of the hammer butt and knocks it up, and then this is the part that then pushes this away as the key lever comes down. It gets pushed away, and then that's the escapement. So this works a great deal like an English grand piano would work, with the exception that in the English grand piano, this is sort of a captive element of the entire key lever, and it makes it impossible to pull a key lever straight out. On this particular instrument, though, we can pull the key lever out, and so that provides us an ability to see what's going on here, where it just grabs the hammer and knocks it forward. This particular piano has seen a deal more moisture and water than it was good for it, and so a lot of the joints have bound up a bit. It is absolutely not in anything that would be called playing condition at the moment. I've looked over it pretty carefully, and I don't see anything that's going on from a tension standpoint. But notice again that once again we have a vertical grand piano, because the strings are all starting down here at the key lever point, and then in this case, rather than coming way over like that recumbent piano, it comes up much higher in the ear. So it doesn't take up any more space in the room than the Tailum. It's a little more imposing. It would stand out in the room a bit more. These were fairly popular, and there are a number of these Lyra-type pianos by several different builders that exist out there. This one about 1825, we see them from about 1825 to about 1840. Giraffe pianos, about the same time frame, maybe a little bit later on the latest giraffe pianos. And then that whole giraffe style of piano, where it came up very high and then had an elegant slope down to it, was something that builders returned to again and again. So the Dietz harp piano that we'll talk about in one of our upcoming episodes, again, built very much like that. They look like harps, and they have a harp with a keyboard mounted to them. In this case, it's a design all to itself, but it also looks like what we would call pyramid piano. So the other way of making a piano that looks just like this, but without the elegant organic curves, is to have straight sides up, and then very much more of a Washington Monument look. It's called a pyramid piano because it has the two angles that are up sort of like a pyramid. And in this case, we're bichord throughout the compass, and so it's going to give a nice but softer sound. It's not going to really have the sound of a grand piano. We also have close spun, overspun strings in the bass to compensate for the fact that the bass is a little shorter than it would normally be. So this isn't one of the wall climbers. It isn't absolutely giant. It sits about 6 feet 6 inches high at the top, and then on the really, really big wall climbers, they were like 8 feet 6 inches tall. We have one that's right with us now that's 8 feet 3 inches tall, so one of the bigger. And what else can we say about this that's interesting? Like a good Viennese piano, it has the knee levers for moderator. In this case, all we do is we raise the dampers, and we have a moderator that comes in. So, a rather interesting sort of instrument called the Lyra-flügel or lyre piano, and another one of the vertical forte piano styles. Let's move along now and look at an upright piano. So follow me as we zoom through storage. Such wonderful things.
All right.
So I really appreciate everyone's patience as we walk through these. Once again, these are all from the Marlowe-Sigel musical instrument collection. Marlowe collected these at various points, and they're all wonderful representations of a style of instrument. And we're just so happy to have them here and to be able to show some things to you. So this particular piano by Stein, and as you guys recall, Andre has broken away from Nanette Stryker, née Stein, and he's building on his own. And he was a very, very famous builder himself, you know, building some really wonderful stuff. And in this case, we're once again, we have 6 octaves, about 1820, so fairly early for an upright piano. And this was what we would call an upright grand piano. By that I mean that the whole length of this from bottom to the top is the same sort of length that we would normally encounter in a Viennese grand piano. How to see inside? Well, once again, we have these lovely little medallions, and they shift. In this case, they shift downward, and this lovely cloth-covered panel comes off. This particular panel has a silk that Marlowe selected to go in place that very closely matches the original. The original silk was obviously lost, and this one has had a little accident at some point. But as we get inside, what we find is a piano with strings as long as any Viennese grand that you would see at the time. Let's look at the rest of the instrument. So here is our fall board, and it slides out of the way. All right, revealing the key levers and such. And then if you wanted to see a little closer, here's the name board, Andre Stein, made in, you know, from Augsburg, made in Vienna. So he's making sure that you know, all points are covered as he brings forward this lovely instrument. And so what can we say about this one? Well, this one has, if you go into Harding or any of the parts that talk about the hanging Viennese action, this is a hanging Viennese action. So essentially what happens is when I hit a key lever, like that, I'm actually, the action is below the key bed, and it brings a hammer striking down well below the key bed, so it's down deep in the instrument. And one of the things that we can do is push this little knob to the side. There we go. So these are the dampers. And I'm just going to pull this damper rack out of the way so that you guys can see a little bit more of what's going on here. Now, unfortunately, with a piano like this, I'm not able to actually pull up the action and show you a version of it because it's now attached to a rail inside. This whole bed will come out, and then you would be able to see that, and that's a little more than I think we want to get into today. But what I can show you is that we have the 4 pedals at the bottom, and inside this instrument we have a moderator set, and so I can actually do 1 moderator or 2 moderators, so I can go anywhere from mildly moderated to much more heavily moderated. As far as what does this piano sound like? Well, let me just play a few notes here. Let's see if I can remember. And there's no damper, so obviously it's going to ring and ring. A lovely big grand piano sound. Can this one be tensioned? And the answer is not right now. As I looked over this instrument, I saw a number of cracks up here, and then particularly in the treble. This part of the instrument is now parting company with the back of the instrument. I would say that because we have a number of Viennese grands that we can already play, we'll probably keep this one just for looking at. if you wanted to bring it back to tension, then we have to address all of these elements here where things are coming apart. And in this case, this would be one of those examples where you want to use reversible techniques that will allow you to fix it without erasing history or changing the engineering of the piano. So something that we would want to be very, very careful with. For tuning, you notice that the tuning pins are following the curve here, and then how do you get up to here? Well, there's another wonderful little button on the side, and then this swings back, and now I have full access to the tuning pins all throughout. As far as getting the wedges in, you really do need to remove the dampers before you can get your felt or your wedges in to finish tuning the treble part of the piano. So normally the piano would be taken down to something about like this before we would try to tune it. And then there's bichord through the brass, which are all overspun, and then trichord throughout the rest of the compass. So I'm happy to have brought these to you a little bit more. There's a few elements I think most people don't get a chance to really see on the inside of these, and some of these are instruments that, you know, there's really only one or two examples in the world that you would have a chance to even open up and look at. So I will come back to you and answer all of your questions. I thank you guys for tuning in. On Friday of this week, we're going to take a little change in pace because we are a Siegel Music Museum and we love all things musical. We're going to be visiting with Mr. Chris Stack, a local musician who works with some very wonderful sound spaces. And I want to bring those to you because I think that one of the things that I was always interested in with these instruments was the really different timbre that you get when you're hearing them and playing them. In other words, it doesn't sound like a regular harpsichord or piano. It has its own special sound to it. And then, you know, what other instruments can do that? And so Chris does some wonderful work with electronic instruments and with acoustic instruments, but processing them. I want you guys to see that. So we're going to do that on Friday, and then we'll have another set of wonderful programs next week where we tear through some of the Siegel collection. In the meantime, if you have questions, please send them in. If you have suggestions, please let me hear from you. And just to let you know that going forward, we're probably going to be down to just broadcasting from the museum page. By next week, I expect to have my additional sound equipment so you can hear me easier and so you can hear the instruments better. And so thank you very much,